Agnes Callamard, you are the Secretary General of Amnesty International. Thank you so much for taking the time to speaking with us today on Kalam podcast. We're deeply honored. Amnesty International is obviously an organization we respect so much and follow its work. Welcome to the show, Agnes.
Thank you.
So we're here today to speak about a report that Amnesty International released just a few days ago, really, concerning what has been going on in Gaza for the past year and a month, something like that. So, in the broadest terms as possible, I'll ask you this open question: what has been going on in Gaza for the past year and month, 2 months?
When according to our painstakingly researched report that we just published a few days ago, a genocide against the Palestinians of Gaza by Israel authorities is what has been going on in Gaza for the last 14 months. It may not have started on the first day, but it is certainly our finding that Israel has been committing and is committing the crime of genocide against the Palestinians of Gaza. That's the main conclusion. Now, if you give me a few more minutes, I can tell you that what we have found is that Israel is committing three genocidal acts that are prohibited by the Genocide Convention. They are killings, causing serious bodily harm, and inflicting conditions of life that are calculated to bring about the destruction of the Palestinians in part or in whole. Those three genocidal acts are prohibited by the Genocide Convention. However, that is not enough to prove genocide. We also demonstrated genocidal intent, and that's probably the most um, remarkable feature of the crime of genocide as compared to other crime. You need to prove that those committing the genocide actually intended to eradicate, destroy the population physically, biologically, or culturally, in whole or in part. And the threshold for determining intent is very high. Um, and that's what we have spent most of the last 6 months doing, researching the evidence in order to show that indeed Israel meet the threshold of genocidal intent, that the Palestinians of Gaza are a protected group under international law, and that the Israel authorities intended and intend to destroy it.
So, when you talk about destroying another people,
Yeah.
obviously most people in the West, maybe in the whole world, will think about other famous genocides like the Holocaust and Rwanda, for example, or even in the Yugoslavian conflict in Bosnia, for example. And many people who maybe would want to defend Israel would talk about scale and volume and say that, this is nowhere close to the devastation that we saw during the Holocaust, for example. What do you say to that kind of response?
The first important message is that it is not very helpful to compare atrocity crimes in that way. It is not helpful to compare genocide. What is important is to demonstrate whether or not the Genocide Convention threshold is being met. That is what matters. The Rwanda genocide, the Cambodian genocide, the genocide of indigenous people in Guatemala, the genocide in Srebrenica, all of them presented very specific dimension and features which may not be found, which are not found in each other. And of course, the genocide, the Holocaust is probably to this day the most horrific crimes committed against a protected group in the numbers and in the bureaucratization of the killing machine. Um, But there is no doubt that what is happening in Gaza right now is a genocide. It is distinct, different from what happened in Rwanda or Cambodia, or during World War II, or in Guatemala, but it is meeting the threshold of the Genocide Convention. And basically, the Genocide Convention demands three things. It demands to prove that the group that is being targeted is protected, meaning that it has specific ethnic, racial, or national features that are distinguished from other people. There is absolutely no doubt that the Palestinians in general are a protected group, and the Palestinians of Gaza are a subgroup of that group, and they are protected given their geographical and cultural characteristics. So that's the first thing. The second dimension of the Genocide Convention is that you need to prove that genocidal acts are happening. We prove that three acts are taking place: the killings, meaning the deliberate killings of civilians in Gaza. We have documented 15 direct attack on civilians that could not be explained or excused by military necessity. This is a tip of the iceberg, but those deliberate attacks, killings, hundreds of people at once, many of them from the same family, many children, have been taking place for the last 12, 14 months. Even yesterday, there were still more killings being reported of children and women and civilians. We have proven that those attacks are taking place often enough, or have taken place often enough, using very large bombs, those that are meant to inflict the greatest number of casualties in a densely populated urban setting. And they are used at times when they are bound to have the greatest number of victims because they are used at night when people are asleep. That's a killing. Many of those attacks have harmed people beyond killings, meaning wounded. The number of wounded is astronomical. It's the same as with the number of killings. It is on a scale for that period that has not been seen under any conflict of the 21st century. The number of wounded, the number of amputation is extremely high. And then the third genocidal act is imposing conditions of life that are meant to destroy the population. And that too, you know, uh, Palestinians cannot eat what they should be able to eat. They cannot drink drinkable water. And that is happening because the farmable land, the land that was used to produce agricultural products, have been razed, have been destroyed. They cannot drink drinkable water because the water infrastructures have been entirely destroyed. They cannot eat because the bakeries have almost all been uh, destroyed. They cannot find medicine because the only way to get medicine is through humanitarian aid that is not coming to the extent that is required given the incredible state of vulnerability of that population. We have seen over and over again the destruction of hospitals. We know that surgeons cannot operate, that doctors cannot practice, people cannot farm, they cannot fish, they cannot survive. And their dignity has been taken away from them. They have to fight to get a piece of bread. The majority of those killed are women and children. These are not military targets. And we have proven that. 300 pages proving those crimes. And the intent is the third dimension. And as I have said, most of the crimes that we have documented cannot be explained by the presence of Hamas or the military objective to destroy Hamas. Yes, we understand that Israel as military objectives because it is an armed conflict. We understand that they want to destroy or to get rid of Hamas. That too may be a military objective. But what we have documented, what we are showing in this report, is that the pattern of conduct repeated day after day, week after week, months after months, cannot be explained by the necessity to get rid of Hamas. It can only be explained by the intent to destroy the Palestinians of Gaza, and that is genocidal intent. That's what we need to focus on. The definition of genocide under international law, not comparing genocide among each other.
And yes, what you're describing is quite terrifying, isn't it? It's a kind of a terrifying realization, a kind of a terrifying epiphany. Even though many of us who have been following this war, which I think I mean, impossible for anyone to deny anymore, is a genocide. It's been sort of apparent the horrific nature of what is going on in Gaza, but now having sort of proven it in not just a cultural sense, but in a juridical sense. You and I spoke the last time, I think about a year ago, when I interviewed you for Swedish radio, and at that point, Amnesty International had done the work of proving war crimes in the early days after October 7. Now that you've proven genocide, did you expect this?
Did we expect to find genocide?
Yeah, I mean,
That's your
I guess
question?
it's a more of a personal question, I guess. I mean, how does this? How do you feel about this? It's such a heavy finding.
Well, some people, certainly the Palestinians of Gaza, many others, including UN experts, have found and said genocide was happening way before we did. So I don't think Amnesty was very fast and quick in reaching that conclusion. Um, I think we took a great deal of care. We did not go into the research thinking we're going to find genocide. We went into it with a very objective mindset. We considered whether or not what was happening was crime against humanity, whether that could indeed amount to crimes against humanity of destruction, um, of killing. But we also went back to a couple of issues. One is the fact that Palestinians of Gaza are a protected group. So any attempt to destroy them needed to be seen as well from the standpoint of the fact that under international law, they are absolutely a protected group. And second was the threshold of intention versus recklessness. We did consider and demand and ask, looking at all those acts, could they be done by accident? Could they be the product of recklessness, as you find in many armed conflicts? And we agreed together that one of those acts, or even two or three, could have been the product of recklessness. There is no doubt. But when you look at them together, in other words, when you move from investigating one war crimes to looking at all those war crimes together, then you need to start asking the question, okay, they did that on the 7th of October, or actually a bit later, you know, but they are still doing it in April. How can that be explained by recklessness? Are they that incompetent? The one of the, by all standard, one of the better armies around the world. It just defies belief that, 10 months, 6 months, 8 months into the conflict, they still target civilian infrastructures when they have been told it's civilians. They still go after the farming land. They destroy those infrastructures even though they have gained control over them. Um, Destroy water infrastructures. I mean, yes, one maybe, but all of them.
Yeah.
He just defies belief that you could consider those actions day after day, week after week, months after months, the product of recklessness. It's just not possible. It just is not possible. So it has to be intentional. And what is the purpose of that destruction? It has to be the intention to destroy the people of Gaza, the Palestinian people of Gaza, because you're killing them, because you're wounding them, because you're harming them in their identity, in their culture, in their religion, because you're depriving them of access to water, you're depriving them of access to food, you're depriving them of dignity. And you are doing that intentionally.
Hmm.
That is the definition of genocide and genocidal intent.
Could you give a concrete example of something that maybe on the 8th of October could, in a very generous view, be deemed reckless that Israel has still been doing, you know, 10 months later, 12 months later?
As I mentioned, the targeting of civilian infrastructures or the targeting of civilians in their home. We have documented entire families in October being wiped out in one attack, and yet we document the same thing in April.
Yeah.
So that's one such example.
Airstrikes against high rise apartment buildings where entire families are wiped out in one strike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes three generations of a family are being wiped out. Three
Yeah.
generations.
How has the process been for the field workers that have been gathering this data and information, compiling these almost 300 pages? What have the conditions been for them? How have the Israelis, or how maybe have they not been helpful in providing, sort of like facilitating their work?
Well, so the field workers in Gaza have worked for the last 14 months under the worst possible conditions. Um, you know, I've been living in fear to get a phone call to let me know that one of them has died. And I am beyond grateful to them for the work that they are doing, for the information that they are gathering, the photo that they are taking, the extreme care that they are taking. Now, in addition to their work, we've had people um, outside Gaza doing a lot of interviews online, a lot of interviews by phone. Uh, as you know, we have had more than 200 people that have been interviewed. We've interviewed victims, sometimes several times. We've interviewed humanitarian workers. We've done a lot of analysis of information that are in the public domain, information provided by the UN, information provided by humanitarian agencies, even information provided by the Israelis. The Israeli authorities themselves has never responded to our demands for feedback. We have written to them before we published anything. It's part of our methodology, but not once over the last 14 months have they interacted with us, have they provided any kind of additional information. Now, my colleagues, some of whom are living in Israel and in the occupied territories, are doing that too under very difficult conditions. Um, Everyone for the last 14 months has been deeply experiencing what's happening. Some of them because they are Palestinians, some of them because they have families in Gaza, some of them because they have lost their entire families in Gaza, as it has happened to some of our colleagues. Um, it is, it is for many, for many, a personal, something very personal. However, we are also professional, um, and we have an extraordinary, complex quality control system, which also explain why it has taken so long to produce the report. We have had almost every sentence of that report has been discussed, debated between people that are our lawyers, our arms expert, our humanitarian expert, our economic rights expert, our forensic expert. The layers of review of this report has been extraordinary, I will say, more than we have ever done because of the seriousness of the finding and the allegation.
How has this report been received? Obviously, certain events of the past few days may have overshadowed it slightly. Obviously, the Assad regime of Syria, that was in power for over half a century, has fallen. Obviously, also a huge human rights issue. But as far as it hasn't been overshadowed, how has the report been received by the international community, by certain stakeholders, and by Israel itself?
Been overshadowed by Syria. It has been fairly well received, in fact, strangely enough. We haven't gotten the pushback and the extremely negative reaction that we were expecting, except from the Israeli authorities that I believe called us fanaticals.
Sure.
Um, Interestingly enough, the US administration don't agree with our finding, but also rejected the qualification used by the Israel government. So what do we want? I mean, liking our report, not liking our report, we don't care. This is not the end. This is not the end, the objective. The objective is for governments to, we will hope, agreeing that a genocide is taking place, even if they can't reach that conclusion, surely they know that an extraordinary level of violations are happening and that this should not be happening. So, what we are asking for is yes, make a determination of genocide, but even if you can't reach that determination, take action. Words are not enough. People are dying. People are being stripped of their dignity. Kids are dying. People are being amputated without any kind of protection. All of that. You can't ever claim that you didn't know. It's being broadcasted in front of your eyes. What are you doing? Saying the right words is not enough. It certainly is not enough after 40 months. So we want state to take collective action. We are asking them to create a platform to put an end to what we call genocide, uh, to demand that they commit to the arrest warrant issued by the ICC, that they commit to investigating anyone on their territories who may have been affiliated with the IDF in Gaza and therefore may be a war criminal or indeed a genocider. We are asking that they are taking all necessary sanctions against Israel now, not in 2 months, not in 3 months, now. And we are saying do that together. It cannot just be one state doing one thing like South Africa, great, but we need to see something much more collective. There have been European states that have taken more action than others. I have in mind Norway, Spain, Ireland, Belgium, Slovenia. They must come together now. They must really create a platform, invite others, and said, right, we've got to put an end to that. This is what we intend to do collectively and individually. we need to see much more actions happening, and in the Arab world too. Because the Arab states have done very little. I mean, I will say almost close to nothing. So people in those countries must demand of their government to do far more than, frankly, close to nothing. Jordan, the Kuwaitis, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. I mean, what are you actually doing to prevent the genocide?
Yeah.
The third group of state are those that are facing the risk of being complicit in the crime of genocide. They are those who are continuing to transfer weapons to Israel while the crime of genocide is taking place. So they could very well face the risk of being found complicit in the crime of genocide. And in any case, they are already guilty of failing to prevent the crime of genocide. So those ones must act immediately. In the first place, the United States. President Biden has only 1 month left. Well, all I can say is for that 1 month, be on the right side of history. Stop transferring weapons to Israel.
Agnes Callamard, I'm so grateful that you would take the time to speak with us today on Kalam podcast. Thank you for Amnesty International's important work, and we hope that this report will bring about the kind of change that it's intending to. So thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you.